On VHF Channel 16, the International Maritime Distress and Safety frequency that every commercial vessel on Earth monitors continuously, the frequency that captains tune to when they need to know if a waterway is safe, a voice broadcast from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps repeated the same sentence over and over to every ship within radio range of the Persian Gulf this afternoon. No ship is allowed to pass. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced that the Strait of Hormuz, a key global shipping lane, has been effectively closed to maritime vessels after the United States and Israel struck Iran overnight. The IRGC warned various vessels that, due to the insecure conditions around the strait resulting from U.S. and Israeli military aggression and Iran's responses, passage through the strait is currently unsafe. The Iranian military branch's statement read, "effectively closed." Those two words, transmitted on VHF Channel 16, confirmed by the British Maritime Agency UKMTO, confirmed by the European Naval Mission, confirmed by tanker operators from Rotterdam to Singapore who are at this moment deciding whether to order their vessels to slow down, anchor, or reverse course, are the two most economically consequential words spoken by any government in the world today. On VHF Maritime Waves, the Guardians of the Revolution broadcast a clear message. No ship is allowed to pass. The major oil companies are already suspending their shipments. Iran warns by radio that passage through the Strait of Hormuz is prohibited. 20 to 21 million barrels of oil transit every single day through this bottleneck. 20% of global consumption. 20 million barrels per day through a waterway that is 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, narrower than the English Channel, narrower than the distance between Manhattan and New Jersey's shore if you scaled it to ocean geography. That is 1/5 of everything the world burns in cars, in factories, in power plants, in the aircraft whose airspace over the Gulf is already closed, in the ships whose captains are right now listening to that VHF broadcast and calculating whether their insurance will cover transit of a waterway where an active naval war is being fought overhead. A prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz is a guaranteed global recession. More than 20 million barrels of crude have been loaded for export today in the Gulf from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Qatar. About 3/4 of those barrels were headed to China, India, Japan, and South Korea. China, the world's second largest economy, receives half of its crude imports through the strait, half of China's crude imports. Every barrel of Saudi oil going to Tokyo, every LNG cargo going to Korea, every refined product going to India, every shipment that moves through the world's most important oil choke point, stopped. Not slowed, not delayed, stopped. On a Saturday afternoon. By a radio broadcast from a military organization whose supreme leader may or may not have died this morning, whose chain of command is described as in disarray, and whose pre-programmed operational doctrine apparently includes activating the strait closure automatically, regardless of who is alive to give the order. The passage is effectively closed, reports Tasnim, Iran's Revolutionary Guard-affiliated media outlet. Gas prices in Europe could rise by as much as 70%, and there could even be gas shortages in Central and Eastern Europe. On Saturday, UKMTO reported that the IRGC warned vessels that no ship is allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz following U.S. and Israeli strikes. Roughly 750 vessels were in transit at the moment the closure was declared. Tankers loaded with Saudi crude heading to China, LNG carriers heading to Japan, refined product ships heading to India, all of them now inside a waterway where the U.S. Navy has just told their operators it cannot guarantee their safety, where insurance firms have already moved to a 50% premium increase, where major oil companies including Shell, BP, and Total Energies have suspended new shipments, pending assessment of conditions. Iran threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz in 2012 and 2019 and 2023. Every single time, every analyst on Earth said the same thing. Iran would never actually do it because closing the strait cuts off Iran's own oil exports, risks alienating China, which buys 90% of Iranian crude, and would trigger an American military response to reopen it. Every single time, every analyst on Earth was right, because every single time before today, Iran did not do it. Today, Iran did it. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Backdoor Economics exists to give you the analysis that mainstream financial media won't deliver fast enough. Every update on this crisis will come to this channel first. Subscribe now, because Monday is 36 hours away and you need to be here when the markets open. Stay with me, because Monday morning is 36 hours away, and the bill for Operation Epic Fury will not be paid in missiles. It will be paid at the pump. To understand why the Strait of Hormuz's closure is categorically different from every other development of today's war, different from the base strikes, the drone attacks on Dubai, the destruction of Qatar's radar, the reported death of senior IRGC commanders, you need to understand a single number that every oil market analyst has been quietly dreading for 47 years. Global investment banks, including JP Morgan and economic research institutes, estimate that a full blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, combined with escalating military conflict, could push international oil prices beyond $120 to $130 per barrel, more than 70% above current levels of around $70 per barrel. Zia Dodd, chief economist at Bloomberg Economics, analyzed that historical price movements show oil prices tend to rise 4% for every 1% decrease in supply, $120 to $130 per barrel from roughly $70 where crude was trading on Friday in a single weekend. Before Asian markets open Sunday morning, before London opens, before New York opens Monday morning to a world in which the Strait of Hormuz is closed, the Gulf's airspace is shut, the Fifth Fleet headquarters has been struck, and the chain of command of the country that controls the waterway is described as in disarray, meaning there is no political authority to call the IRGC naval forces off, even if America or Iran's own government wanted to reverse the closure order. The world's spare oil capacity comes from the Gulf states and would be unable to pass through the strait in the event of a closure, effectively sealing it off from the global market. About 20% of the world's liquid natural gas exports also flow through the strait, mostly from Qatar, and would be impossible to replace at any comparable speed. What you would see is hoarding, especially by Asian countries that are major importers of oil and gas, the moment they understood that Hormuz is closed. You would see the mother of all bidding wars. Oil prices would have to rise high enough to trigger an economic downturn that reduces demand to balance the market. There just isn't enough discretionary or elastic demand for oil. The mother of all bidding wars. That phrase, from an energy analyst quoted by CNBC this afternoon, describes the specific mechanism through which the strait closure translates into a global recession. China, Japan, South Korea, and India, the four largest Asian economies, all of which receive the majority of their crude through the strait, will immediately begin competing for every barrel available outside the Gulf. Norwegian crude, American shale, Russian oil that is already under sanctions, West African crude. Every barrel that can physically be delivered anywhere outside the Strait of Hormuz becomes a bidding target for four of the world's largest economies simultaneously, on a timeline of days, not weeks. Because refineries need constant supply and strategic petroleum reserves last between 30 and 90 days depending on the country. The Saudis have a pipeline that spans their country from the east to the western Red Sea coast. The UAE has a pipeline that terminates at the Gulf of Oman, bypassing the Strait of Hormuz entirely. Those are the two physical alternatives that exist to move Gulf oil without transiting the strait. And together, they can move approximately 6.5 million barrels per day at maximum throughput, compared to the 20 million barrels per day that normally pass through the strait. Even with both bypass pipelines running at absolute full capacity, the world is still short 13.5 million barrels per day from normal supply on the first day of closure. And every subsequent day, that gap compounds. And the strait is not just closed by declaration. Iran has large stockpiles of naval mines that have been pre-positioned in the waterway's shipping lanes. Ships that attempt to transit are not just ignoring a radio broadcast, they are navigating through a minefield in a corridor 33 kilometers wide, under the operational control of a military organization that just struck 6 countries simultaneously and announced it will continue operations relentlessly until the enemy is decisively defeated. By Monday, the national average for gas prices could very well surpass $3 per gallon. The current average sits at $2.98 per gallon as of this Saturday, according to 8OA. If there are no signs of de-escalation through Sunday, some analysts are forecasting that oil prices could jump by as much as $20 per barrel or more. Given the full scale of the military retaliation now underway, most of the strategic initiative lies with Iran. Rystad Energy's Jorge Leon told Yahoo Finance, most of the strategic initiative now lies with Iran. That sentence, published by Yahoo Finance at 6 p.m. Eastern, citing Rystad Energy, the world's largest private oil and gas consulting firm, is the definitive professional assessment of where the war stands tonight. America launched the biggest air campaign in 23 years. Iran struck 6 countries in 90 minutes. And the strategic initiative, the ability to determine what happens next, to choose escalation or de-escalation, to set the terms on which this conflict continues, belongs to the country whose supreme leader may be dead and whose chain of command is described as in disarray. There is a sentence from today's intelligence reporting that needs to be read against the live wire reports from the last hour, because it was written by someone who understood something about the Strait of Hormuz closure that most Western analysts have missed entirely. The sentence is this: Iran knows that closing the Strait of Hormuz hurts China more than it hurts America. So if Iran is closing the strait anyway, it means Iran has already decided that survival matters more than China's approval. Iran's own oil exports flow to China through the strait. Approximately 90% of Iran's oil output goes to China in defiance of U.S. sanctions. Closing the strait cuts off Iran's primary revenue source. the 3.3 million barrels per day that China was purchasing in defiance of American maximum pressure, the oil income that kept Iran's economy alive. Closing the strait is an act of economic self-destruction combined with economic warfare. Iran burning its own revenue source to deny the world 20% of its daily supply and force a global crisis that makes the cost of continuing Operation Epic Fury visible to every American consumer at the pump by Monday morning. Trading markets are currently closed, so the effect on oil prices won't be easy to quantify until they open late Sunday. But crude prices have been creeping upward for weeks, based largely on concerns about threats to oil supplies and trade if the U.S. did attack Iran. During heightened conflict between Iran and Israel last year, both sides avoided targeting oil production or export facilities. The Strait of Hormuz remained open. Oil prices remained relatively stable. June 2025, Strait open, oil stable, war ended in 12 days. Today, Strait closed. 750 vessels in a minefield. Insurance suspended. Major oil companies halted. And the war that started this morning has no ceasefire on the horizon, no diplomatic channel still operational, and a chain of command on the Iranian side too fragmented to easily reverse the closure order even if it wanted to. The Trump administration has one tool available before Monday's market open that could meaningfully affect the price trajectory: the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The SPR holds approximately 371 million barrels, roughly 18 days of American oil consumption at current rates. Releasing it at maximum drawdown would not replace the 20 million barrels per day the Strait normally carries, but it would signal to markets that America has a buffer, and signals matter in the first hours of a price spike. The Trump administration could tap the Strategic Petroleum Reserve if oil prices spike, said Kevin Book, managing director of research at Clearview Energy Partners. Could, not will, not has decided to. Could, meaning the tool exists, the decision has not been announced, and markets will open Sunday in Asia without knowing whether America will deploy its strategic buffer or allow prices to find their own level in a world where 1/5 of global oil supply has just been cut off by a minefield and a radio broadcast. There is one final irony in today's events that no Western outlet has fully captured. Trump chose Saturday to start the war because financial markets are closed on weekends. He calculated that the military operation would be complete, or at least its opening phase would be complete, before Monday's market open. That calculation assumed a short, controlled operation, a 12-day war like June 2025, a declaration of victory on Sunday, stability messaging on Monday, markets opening to a world where the nuclear threat was eliminated and the regime was on its way out. Instead, the strait is closed. The chain of command is in disarray. Hezbollah has not yet announced its decision. The Houthis have resumed Red Sea operations. The IRGC has struck 6 countries. Qatar's early warning radar is destroyed. A U.S.-based runway in Kuwait is damaged. The Fifth Fleet's headquarters has been hit. Civilians are dead in Manab. And the man Trump said was building missiles to hit American cities, a claim his own intelligence officials said was not supported by any assessment they had seen, may or may not be dead in the rubble of his compound in Tehran. Trump triggered this war by carefully choosing his weekend. But on Monday morning, markets will open and present the bill. The real test will not be played out in the Gulf sky. It will be played out on Wall Street and at the pump of millions of Americans. Monday morning is the next hard deadline. The strait is closed, the mines are in the water, the tankers are anchored or reversing course. The bidding war for every barrel outside the Gulf has not yet begun, because the markets that run that bidding war do not open until Sunday night in Asia. What they open to will tell us whether this war stays at the level of a regional catastrophe or becomes the global economic crisis that every analyst who has studied this choke point for the past 50 years has warned about. In paper after paper, in testimony after testimony, in model after model, all of which said the same thing. A prolonged Strait of Hormuz closure is a guaranteed global recession. The strait is closed. The guarantee has been activated. This is backdoor economics. If what you just watched made sense of something the rest of the media isn't explaining clearly enough, that's exactly why this channel exists. We don't give you the surface headlines, we give you the mechanism underneath them, the economic wiring behind the geopolitical fire. The numbers the anchors skip over because they assume you won't follow. You followed, and that matters. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. Share this video, because the Strait of Hormuz is closed for the first time in history. 20 million barrels of daily supply is cut off. And Monday morning is coming whether the world is ready or not. We'll be here when it opens. Backdoor economics. See you on the other side of Monday.